What happens regularly that would horrify a person from 100 years ago? Drones. Basically anything high-tech. Want to fly across the Atlantic? Well, let me book a flight on my smartphone. You'll be there in a couple hours. Want to know the weather over there? Let me look it up. Want to see pictures of your destination we took from space? Here you go. 1920s person. So airplanes are now a regular means of travel? 2020s person. Yeah, the technology developed rapidly after World War II. 1920s. World War what? 2020s. Oh, you might want to sit down for this. Why aren't you going to church? Why are you dressed like that? Why are you drinking from the same water fountain as that guy? The amount of atheists would give a person from 100 years ago a heart attack. Women's fashion. Knees were considered scandalous. Knees. I shit you not, tablecloths were invented to cover the table's legs. Interracial marriage. Also same-sex marriage. Same-sex interracial marriage between two non-binary people. Make 1920s America destroy itself to stop itself from happening. The amount of single people in their 20s and 30s. No joke. My great-grandpa took the horse and buggy to the church across the river and asked for a wife. He returned a week later, and they gave him a woman who was 21. She was considered nearly unmarriable due to her advanced age. They of course then went back to the farm and had 12 children that survived to adulthood as you did back then. I would like one wife, please. People taking fat from their butts and putting it in their cheeks. The way people are dressed. Men not in suits would be seen as uneducated production workers, and women wearing shorts and close-fitting clothes would be seen as promiscuous. For what it's worth, grainy black and white photographs are hiding lots of stained and frayed fabric. Sure, suits and ties were a lot more common, but for a lot of guys, it was their only suit, and they had been wearing it for years and years, and the fabric was dotted with patched-over rips. I think your average 19-20 footer would be super impressed by how bright and clean everybody's clothes are these days. Birth control. Most music probably. Imagine people from 100 years ago listening to WAP, figuring they understand what the slang words mean. Death metal would be a bit of a surprise to them. The plethora of graphic NORP available. I once read a shower thought that said I could see more naked women in 5 minutes on the internet than my great-grandfather could have seen in his lifetime. There are numerous devices in my house that look like weird windows that sometimes make a sound, then I touch the screen, and then another person is just there, talking to me. It's clearly magic or a portal to another realm. Also imagine a laptop. What does that weird-looking plastic book do? Pretty sure the pace at which the world is improving and evolving. Look at the technology nowadays. Pretty sure each day they bring out a new and improved chip or whatnot. It's insane to think about. People in 1920 thought the world was changing pretty fast, and one could make a case that they would have seen more change in their lifetime than we have. An adult in 1920, born 1900 or earlier, would have been born before airplanes existed, when cars and radio were still a novelty, and there was no such thing as a feature film. If you wanted to hear music, you played it yourself, sang, or went to a concert, unless you were one of the few people rich enough to buy one of the first wax cylinder phonographs. All that had changed by 1920. In the US, women had the vote by 1920, and were starting to cut their hair and wear skirts that didn't sweep the floor. Prohibition had gone into effect. The Great War had devastated a generation of young men in Western Europe and changed social mores throughout the West. The Bolsheviks had killed the Tsar and taken over the former Russian Empire. The Panama Canal had been completed, saving 3,500 nautical miles and revolutionizing world trade. Between 1900 and 1920 we figured out how to do safe blood transfusions, and X-rays became a hospital staple. We were on the brink of discovering insulin, so that diabetes would no longer be a death sentence. From 2000 to today, most change is about making existing technology faster, more efficient, and in the case of phones and computers, smaller. Graphics have become better. Instead of Ethernet cables, we're wireless. There have been few, if any, changes to our daily lives as radical as seeing streets full of horses become streets full of cars, or seeing airplanes go from a couple of hobbyists' clever toy to seeing them used in combat. How many people are open about having mental illnesses and that they're actually very common and definitely do not require lobotomies? Nobody wearing hats. And men having beards without being sailors, communists, or old. Really weird, but in my culture girls weren't allowed to eat a specific type of food because it was reserved for males. So just the sight idea of women enjoying the food 100 years later would really fuck them up. Can you explain it in more detail? Women mostly weren't allowed to eat food rich in protein. The references I'll be using aren't from personal experience because that wasn't something that was practiced in my household. But eggs, for example, it was believed that if you ate eggs you would become sterile, among other things. There's also this specific type of meat. I tried asking my sister, but she too forgot the name, but women weren't allowed to eat it, and I don't know the reason. But it tastes great, so maybe that's the reason? Apparently you also were told not to eat meat from a cow because your child would be born fat. It's weird, man. But it all revolves around food that are often associated with luxury. Luxury meaning food that are just known for being delicious and are usually cooked on special occasions and shit. I don't know. I'm really horrible at explaining things. And I don't know this in full detail, so that's all I can offer. So what you're saying about that practice is, only men can have the best food, and here's a stupid reason why. The amount of stuff we waste and let go to waste. One thing my grandma told me is, if you're full and you eat, so you don't waste it, you're still wasting it. But now you also get all the extra calories. People have noises coming out of their asses. Then they pull a little box out of their back pocket, look at it, and start chattering like there was someone there to talk to. And people are always sitting around looking at pictures in these little boxes. For women, having only one children, with a partner of your choice that you might have met when you traveled far away by yourself, after turning 30 and having spent your 20s working or in higher education, instead of, like, having 10 kids hoping 1 or 2 would survive. Or the vast amount of women choosing to be child-free and taking their bodily autonomy into their own hands. Visibly disabled people being out in public without being part of some kind of entertainment like a freak show. From 1867 to 1974, many U.S. cities had laws that said people who were diseased, maimed, mutilated, or deformed in any way so as to be an unsightly or disgusting object were not allowed in public and could be arrested for it. So seeing us out and about now would be pretty shocking. Casual sex before marriage. I remember talking to my gran about how people of her generation typically got married a lot younger than nowadays, and her response was just, "Because we wanted to have sex." I was mortified. She just laughed. The fact that we have vaccines to prevent terrible diseases such as polio and measles and people are refusing to get them. Part of the problem is that, unlike parents in the 50s who saw the results of these diseases, modern parents never saw that and therefore don't have those horrifying images in their heads. Women doing all the same things men do. My dad told me my great-grandma couldn't have property at her name. Women couldn't own houses. She realized this when she divorced with my great-grandpa. This was only done by word because you couldn't actually change the papers because no, and she wanted to sell the house to buy a new one. But she actually couldn't buy the new house at her name, only the husband could do that. She later bought the house at her son's name, my grandpa. But holy fuck, that would be annoying. Online shopping. That we all carry around a portable device that can connect us with the touch of a finger to a global community and basically all of human knowledge. And we mostly use it to look at Norp and find amusing cat videos. Planes fly over my house. Planes in general. The smallest commercial planes of today are around the same size as the largest planes of 1920. Modern planes also ran on jet engines, whose howl would terrify those who never heard or understood it. A lot of the surgery procedures that we have today come up a lot in old literature. Transplants, brain surgery, especially while conscious, artificial limbs, or any other machines that can be put in the body. Just think of explaining to some from a century ago about how face transplants are a thing now. The sheer amount of rubbish people eat. What normal thing would horrify a person from 100 years ago? Leave a comment, and subscribe to the channel if you want to see more videos like this one.